hearing if Allison
Yeah,
can
that would be nice if Allison can do it, because then we can see it on Front's website that it's nicely embedded.
Exactly. Yeah. Like you can check on Front's website and on.
It's there now. It's there now. Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Great. And then we can check if the sound is working. So in just about 30 seconds or less, I think it's now 4. So I'm going to start to admit people. Is that okay? And then you can check if the sound is on. Okay. So I think, Allison, I'm going to admit people, and then you can switch to the official, like the Zoom being live streamed. Okay. I'm going to do it now. Admitting all. Hi. Hey, everyone. Hey, Ingrid, Josiah, Gareth, Paul, hey. Nice to see you all. How's it going? Everyone is in all these fun places. While we're waiting, we're going to give it like 5 minutes for folks to show up. Feel free, if you want, to change your name to put your preferred pronouns and where you are, if you like. Then we have a sense of the geographic distribution. If you don't know how to do that, you can just click on your picture on the 3 buttons at the top right and rename yourself. And then you can, add whatever pronouns you prefer and where you are. And then we'll quickly be able to see like a spread of the room. Hey, Asen. Hey, sorry about the time difference. I mean, it's like, yeah, Europe changed its, or Berlin. And I mean, I guess Turkey didn't change their time or something. So confusing. And you have a haircut. Love it. So folks are going to be showing up, and just while we're doing that, as I mentioned, feel free to change your, if you want, you can rename yourself to add your pronouns, your preferred pronouns, if you like, and also where you are. And then we'll, we can all like kind of read the room and see where we are. It's nice. I see a lot of familiar faces and some new people here too. And yeah, and if anybody likes, you can also then feel free to put into the chat what you see out your window. After you've changed your name, you can like take a look out your window and just like give us a sense of where we all are and what we're all seeing individually. I'll do that too. Hey, Sarah, I see you there too. Thanks for coming. So as I mentioned, if you want, feel free to change your name to put your preferred pronouns and where you are, and you can type into the chat what you see out your window. The desert of Dubai. There you go. Yeah, I see we've got the desert of Dubai from Christopher Benton. We've got scaffolding from me. Yeah, my building's in construction for the next 2 years, I think. We've got Julia is in East Berlin, in Neukölln. And Gareth Long, we've got gray skies and the last of autumn colors in Toronto. Asad and the reflection of a paper lantern reflected in the pane. The grayness of gray. That's gray. I can hear you on the Belgian gray. Sliver of scaffolding with patches of changing leaves, a brown cat, an orange cat, and green grass, cold Cleveland. And we also have Christian in Cologne with the Old Factory, the biggest cable producer in Germany. Who knew? Creating the connecting cables that bring us together. The fall leaves in Kent, Ohio, a high school from the 4th floor walk up, autumn, and a fogged up window. Looking at a gray, cold Cleveland sky. Nice. So we'll just give it another minute or two till a couple more folks show up, and then we'll start in on things. Type into the chat for everybody else. For all the couple new folks who've shown up, feel free, if you want, to rename yourself, to add your preferred pronouns, and to also add your location. And if you like, you can put into the chat where you are and what you see out the window. Hi, Nai. It's so nice to see you. You know that you are the first person who ever the first time I ever used Zoom was in that class on March 13th or whatever it was that you ran. So nice to see you. Must
Hi,
be late.
it's really nice to see you.
I know. It's like the world, like since March 13th, the Zuma scene has really come along.
Yes.
It's so great. Hi, I see a couple of new faces here too. Welcome. For anybody who's new right here, I just mentioned, feel free to rename yourself to add your personal pronouns that you prefer and to add your location. And then folks are putting into the chat where they are. We have Cleveland, we have Akron, we have Kent, but then we also have Beijing, we have Amsterdam, we have Toronto, we have Brussels, we have Berlin. So we've got a lot of different places right now. We've got New York as well. So, oh, nice. We've got Cork and we've got Dublin. We've got nice little Ireland in the house as well. So great. So I think it's 5 after. So I think people will start to continue to trickle in, I imagine, but may as well start. What do y'all think? All right, so let's, should we put on our title slide and call this a beginning? Okay. So welcome everyone. It's great to see you. And let's see. Okay, so let me gather myself and my thoughts. And most importantly, the Google Doc that contains all my notes. But welcome everyone from wherever you are. And it's lovely to see you all again today. Some old faces, some new faces. That's always an amazing thing. And here we are. It's another Sunday. It's another show. It's another episode of Present, which, this is the 3rd season of the show. I mean, I use the term season pretty loosely, but, we've started this 7 months ago, and here we are. And this 3rd season is presented and supported by Front International 2022, which is the Cleveland Triennial of Contemporary Art. And a lot of you folks are hailing from the Cleveland and Northeast Ohio region, so it's great to have some local faces. And as some of you may know, Front International is a large-scale triennial that's already taking place. It's unfolding now through public programs like this, but also through other initiatives that we're unveiling over the next several months. And it's going to continue over the next almost 2 years and culminate in an exhibition across many venues, over 20 venues in museums and art spaces in Northeast Ohio in summer 2022. And then hopefully it'll leave some traces that'll continue on from there. And so I want to just give a quick shout out and thanks to Fred Bidwell, who is the founder and director of Front, who's given us a lot of trust to let us run this little program here once a month. And Sarah Liska, who is the deputy director and director of exhibitions of Front. And Allison Smith, who is the project manager of Front. And she is also the person who is live streaming this to YouTube right now. So anybody watching this either on YouTube or on the Front website, 2022.frontart.org. This is thanks to Allison Smith in Kent, live streaming using OBS. So thank you all of the Front team for your work and support. Now, some of you who have been here before over the last 7 months that we've been doing the show, you might have gotten used to my opening monologues. I mean, I usually try to introduce myself a little bit. I lay out some of the main narratives or concerns of the episode. And, I try to tell a couple of jokes along the way because, we're always trying to learn something new. I think of this as this is my practice in a little stand-up. And, as it goes, I actually am standing up. So it's very appropriate. But I mean, to be totally honest, I was trying to write this monologue early this morning, and I don't actually feel like I have a lot of grand narratives to offer right now. I mean, and I'm not feeling like a lot of jokes. I mean, I don't know if any of you, raise your hand. You can do that also in the participant tab. Raise your hand you're feeling a little bit similar. I mean, for me, it feels like a pretty overwhelming and serious time in the world. A lot of pain, a lot of suffering with the pandemic raging, but then it's also an extremely serious time in the US for those of you who are there with that's my country of birth and still my half-time residence. And, we've got a historic election coming up in 9 days, which is, I mean, that's like insane to count that it's less than 10 days away. So for today's show, I'm actually going to skip the kind of 7 to 10 minute monologue I usually do and get right into the kind of important part of this program, which is really for me a way to be together with other folks, particularly folks whom we don't already know. And I recently, just last night, or truth be told, I think around like 3 or 4 this morning in a slightly sleepless night, I woke up and started reading this book that was recommended to me by a great designer based now in Copenhagen named Alice Grandois. And it's called, I don't know if any of you have encountered this, I literally just finished the first chapter, but it's called How We Show Up, Reclaiming Family, Friendship, and Community by Mia Birdsong. And so it's fantastic. I've only finished the first couple chapters, but I mean, I can already tell that it's going to have a lot of wisdom for me and a lot of experience about what community means and the complexities of it. The idea that it's not just a kind of simple word. And, I think that community is so important as a theme right now. I mean, it's ever more important in these moments and these days of divisiveness and fractiousness. And I think that part of it is trying to learn individually and as a society how to listen differently, how to listen better. I mean, especially with folks whom we don't already know. And I think that this question of dialogue is really important. And, community is a 9-letter word. It's kind of a big word and some people aren't a big fan of it. But I think that it's about trying to find ways to go beyond what we already know, to learn from others and to learn how to include others. So, but anyways, it looks like I'm breaking my rule because I'm starting to sermonize. I wasn't supposed to do that. So I'm going to skip that and continue. And let me just end that kind of brief sermon with a quote from Adrienne Murray Brown. Many of you might know how much I stand behind this book, Emergent Strategy. Less prep, more presence is one of the great quotes in Adrienne Murray Brown's Emergent Strategy. So anyways, let's go to our great guests that we have today. And so we have some fantastic guests. Here, let me move my mic. See, I'm still always working out how to do this. So we have, first of all, we have Asad Raza, who, Asad, are you there? Maybe we can highlight Asad. We've got, okay, Asad.
No, I'm here, sorry.
Asad's there, sorry, I just wanted to, sorry, yeah, all you guests, turn on your camera, because I'm gonna embarrass you right now. I'm gonna check if you're wearing pants or not. So we've got Asad Raza, who makes exhibitions, projects, situations, and I'm not even sure if he calls himself an artist or a curator, a writer, or an editor, or an organizer. And but maybe it doesn't even matter. And so let's just say he gathers people together and he gets things done. So I'm very excited that he'll be on the show today from Berlin. Then we have Courtenay Finn. And Courtenay Finn, who is the chief curator and of the Museum of Contemporary Art in Cleveland, Ohio, and also part of the Front 2022 artistic team. And she's a curator whom I think is trying to bring back the root of the word curating, which is care. And so we'll talk a lot about care today. And then last, but definitely not least, we have Christian Faubel, who is an interdisciplinary scientist and scholar based in Cologne, Germany. And he is putting the back into robotics. I mean, I've actually known Christian for longer than anybody else in this room. I think that's true, yeah. I don't think my parents are here yet. Maybe my mom will join. That would be interesting. But I've known Christian for a very long time, and he actually has met my mom and worked with my mom before. But we're going to be hearing something entirely new from him today, thinking about music, synchronization, and of course, robots, which is, I think, one of the reasons I hope some of you are here for robots. I know I am. And as always, I want to thank my co-producer, Emily Smith, who is here in Berlin with me. And I want to also thank Julia Iglesias, our virtual studio assistant, who is also working in Berlin, and she's in her own studio so that she doesn't have to be masked right now. So thanks again for everybody for coming, and we're very thrilled to be here with different people. So now, for those of you who have been here before, you probably know I always like to start with some sort of activation for the body, something that engages us not only as kind of a set of eyes and maybe a little bit of typing and hearing, but actually as some other senses. And so today I want to activate our voices as well. So I'm going to play a short 4-minute and 33-second video that is of a thing called counting, a tool that I discovered actually almost exactly 2 years ago on this day, on October 24th, 2018, 1024, very good number for those of you who are into base 12 systems. I kind of rediscovered an ancient tool called counting, but that's a whole nother time. So I'm going to try to play this little video, and hopefully you can listen with and participate with it. So let's see how I get this going. Let's see. Okay.
Hi, my name is Prem Krishnamurthy. Today, I'm here to teach you a simple form of meditation called counting. Counting is very easy to do. You can do it while you're walking, on the train, when you're at home, while you're taking a break from work. The only technology you need are your hands and your mouth. It's a way of synchronizing your body, your voice, and your mind all at once. Counting is an ancient technique, but it's even more relevant today. Anytime you have a couple of minutes and you need to relax your body, focus your mind, or calm your stress, you can use counting. First, you start with your right hand. When you're counting, every segment of your finger is a number. Think of a clock that's turning clockwise. So we can start here, thumb and forefinger, with 1. Then continue. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Why don't you try that with me? You can say the number 2. It makes it even easier. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. If you have 2 hands, it means you have 2 digits. So whereas we're using the right hand for 1 through 10, we can use the left hand for 10 through 100. It's the same principle, just in reverse, going counterclockwise. And here, each finger segment represents not a single number, but the tens digit, like this. We start with thumb and forefinger, and with 10. Then we continue. 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100. Now, try it with me. Again, saying the numbers will make it easier. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100. Let's synchronize your right and your left hand to count to 100. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And when we get to 10, we synchronize it with your left hand. 10. You hold the tens digit on your left hand and continue on your right. 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40. Are you getting the hang of it? 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, 50. and so on and so forth until you get to 100 and beyond. I count every day to 1080, which might sound like a high number, but it gets easier and easier and has even more interesting results. For now though, I'd recommend that anytime you have a couple of minutes in your day and you need to relax your body, focus your mind, or calm your stress, just count to 100. Once you've done that, come back and I'll show you a couple of other ways to make counting even more useful.
Okay, so hopefully some of you learned some new things around counting. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to try something a little new for present. I mean, now, one of the most transformative experiences I've had in the past, that I've had in the past month is taking part in a micro solidarity practice program, which was organized by Richard D. Bartlett and Natalia Lombardo. And it was a really profound 2-week workshop with folks from all over the world. Actually, it was like a little bit like what's happening here. And but we were focused for these 4 sessions on practicing skills for listening, sharing, and helping to create a sense of belonging within small groups. And these are tools that I think are really essential for the world right now. And actually, I'd invited Rich and Natty to be on the show today to share a little bit about microsolidarity, but after working their behinds off for the last several months, they actually wisely instituted a no weekends working policy, which I totally respect and appreciate. It's good to create boundaries for oneself. I haven't learned that lesson yet, but they are here in spirit with us. And so I'm going to try out a practice, which was literally the first thing that we did in this micro solidarity workshop. And let's see how it works here. I mean, bear with me. I'm still a beginner in micro solidarity. And so we're trying out something new. But I hope that you will play along. What we're going to do is we're actually going to divide up the whole group here into a bunch of breakout rooms, and each with about 3 to 4 people. And so the idea will be that that we actually have 3 to 4 people, and hopefully people that you don't already know. And I'm going to ask everyone to do a little check-in, a way of arriving here in the room together and sharing how you are. And I hope you'll take it as a chance to show up and listen to some folks whom you don't already know and meet some new people. And to guide you a little bit, I'm going to pose 2 questions that I'm just going to put forward to you, and give everyone just a minute to jot down. Does anybody have paper or pencil, or obviously have a computer? So just take a moment and jot down some responses for yourself before we go into the groups. Okay? So just hear the 2 questions. And we'll put them in the chat as well, so don't worry if you don't catch them. So the first is, how are you feeling right now? And the second is, what's one thing that you're hoping to learn from the present moment and give to the future? So again, it's how are you feeling right now? And what's one thing that you'd like to learn from the present moment and give to the future? And, I'll just give us about a minute to kind of like take a minute and just write for yourself. Okay. So if you just finish whatever your thoughts are on your mind and then just pick up your pencil. So again, I'm going to try to do this. Wait, is everything okay, Emily?
Yeah, I'm just saying I'm on 3 things.
Okay, yeah, I know. I'm working that out. Don't worry. So I am going to do this. Rich Bartlett, whom I mentioned before, he does these things in a spacious way. So we're actually going to give it 15 minutes. And it means that it hopefully won't be too rushed. And each room will have about 3 to 4 people. And I encourage you to please turn on your cameras. And if you can, to just take it as an opportunity to hear from other folks you don't already know. And I'll leave it up to all of you to divide the time up accordingly to make sure that everyone has a chance to share. And if you do have extra time at the end, of course, you can just discuss and ask further questions of each other. And, think of it in the spirit of like active and empathetic listening. It might be a little awkward at first and something new, but hopefully discomfort means that we're learning something new. So does it sound okay? I'm going to go ahead and put you into the rooms for 15 minutes, and then we'll all rejoin here in the main room after that. Let's just give me 1 second. I'm just making sure the rooms have the right number of people. And here we go. Then Okay. How was that for folks? I mean, it's nice to everyone's joining back, but feel free to turn on your audio for a minute too and just breathe and stretch. It was an experiment. I've never tried that in a group of this scale in this way, but if you like, while I'm cueing us for our next transition, feel free if there's any thoughts you have or any things that come to mind, just put them in the chat for what that was like to be in a breakout room like that. While we're doing that, I'm going to start to share my screen and prep for a small and very, very different interlude. Okay. So let's see. So what I'm going to do just for a very brief interlude before I bring on our first guest is share a very short video by Christopher Coulendren Thomas and Annika Kuhlmann. And it's from a larger project of theirs called On the Next Economy, which is in Triple Canopy, an online publication. And you can, we'll put the link into the chat so that you can all find that. But it's suffice to say, it's a kind of large scale project that thinks about data and work and the future of work and also how this reflects on social media, citizenship, and mobility. And what it will mean, what nations will even mean in an era where one way that people might vote is to actually vote with their feet, to literally get up and move somewhere else. And so I encourage you to take a look at the whole thing, but I'm particularly interested in thinking about these kinds of, quote, soft skills, the kind of empathic listening skills that we're trying to practice just now as being something that might be even more important in the world and also in the economy to come. So I'm going to just play a very short video from this, and then we'll bring on our first guest, Asad Raza. And somebody will, hopefully Julia or Emily will tell me if the audio is working the way I intended to. Here we go. Okay. Okay, so with that, I would love to bring on our first guest, Asad Raza, who is hailing from Berlin. And Asad, let's bring you up on screen. Where do we lose you?
Do I have to do something for that to happen, Prem?
No, there you are. There you
All
are. I think we're officially spotlit.
Okay.
Thank you for joining us. I know you have both a busy schedule and are actually getting on a plane tomorrow. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, that's correct.
I feel like nobody I know, I mean, getting on planes seems like a thing that's so 20th century. It's
I've got layers of masks to wear.
Yeah. Well, well, thank you for joining. I mean, we've known each other for a bunch of years, but I feel like it's really in this lockdown moment and being in, kind of being in lockdown in a way together at a distance that's really kind of given us an opportunity to talk more. But I mean, what I never realized, I mean, I knew you as a kind of artist and a writer and a curator. And, in some ways, I hope you don't mind me saying, a little bit of like an impresario, like a person about town who seems to know everybody. But what I didn't realize was actually like how much your work really has to do with organizing on so many levels. I mean, that before you came to artistic practice, you were working in a lot of other ways. Like, I mean, how do you think about like the roots of your artistic practice, but also how they relate to the other fields you've been involved in?
Yeah, that's a good question. And thank you, Prem, for having me on today. It's cool to be. I've been at so many of these. It's cool to be also kind of part of it in this way. Yeah, I started wanting to do film more when I was really young, when I was a teenager, and I was attracted by like the kind of independent and alternative cinema and experimental cinema that I kind of found in Buffalo when I was a teenager, sort of a neighboring city to Cleveland, in the Great Lakes. And then I got kind of disillusioned with it, and I went back to graduate school. And at that time I got involved in various kinds of activism, and it was the activism that really showed me somehow what I was interested in a funny way, because it felt a lot like when I was working for a film, on a feature film, where there was a group of people, we were working collaboratively on some kind of project. And I'm talking here about political activism. I worked on some of the political campaigns in the mid 2000s, presidential campaign of 2004, and also about organizing. And I was one of the organizers of a labor strike of graduate assistants or teachers who did most of the teaching at NYU in 2005. And those experiences made a big impact on me and kind of pushed me back towards doing my own kind of artistic practice, because I realized that I really enjoyed, rather than reading and writing and doing the things I'd been doing in grad school, organizing felt like something that was like deeply in the present moment, and also something that was very much looking at the future. So as opposed to being oriented toward the past, which scholarship, reading and writing felt to me at that time to be oriented towards, I was sort of missing that aspect of like, we're going to try to make some kind of a positive proposition and put it out that's looking towards the future, which maybe is a reason I found that interesting, the video that you just showed from Christopher Kulandrin Thomas and Annika Kuhlman, because it's so resolutely focused on the future and kind of what's going to happen. And that aspect of getting into the getting thrown into the mix of doing something, which you get in activism, felt very much like something I wanted to get back to. And so then I kind of quit grad school and started to make projects that were at the beginning, again, doing more video and film, but slowly got more and more away from that into just doing things, you could say, with smaller and larger collectives.
Well, it's so interesting because I mean, the work of, as you already pointed out, like the work of filmmaking is so intensely collaborative. I mean, even if there's an ostensible director and an ostensible kind of authorial role, those things in my, limited experience seem so intermixed. Whereas, we still have this idea, or some people I think still have this idea that artists are these like sole individual genius figures who kind of produce things on their own, which also is its own mythology. But it's interesting that you connect that work of directing, that work where it's explicitly collaborative and structured around people making a thing, to that work of activism and organizing, like doing a thing in real time. And that's really that's what also brought us, let's say, together in this Corona period, was like someday in March when you called up a whole bunch of artists and said, hey, I don't know, I remember getting this call from you, and that was just like this, it kind of marked the moment of Corona and the pandemic, you calling a bunch of folks and saying, hey, why don't we start a platform together? And then you started this thing called Home Cooking.
Yeah, I'm glad you remember that day. in a positive way. I think, you know, it just struck me when we were in the middle of that lockdown at the very beginning of it, and suddenly the kind of wheels of culture seemed to have ground to a halt, and nothing was really being produced, and everyone was at home, and everyone was posting. Institutions were posting, you know, their archives on social media or video walkthroughs of shows on social media, and I just felt like this doesn't feel like, as you know, we have all these tools to sort of virtually have experiences, which we didn't maybe take that seriously, or at least which I didn't take that seriously, because I was very focused on embodied experience making and actually being in a space and experiencing things with your body, your proprioception, and your physical presence. But once we were all in the lockdown, I feel like, well, this is the moment to explore these formats that we have available to us. And then it seemed like maybe we just needed a place to do that for various people, whoever really wanted to be part of that. So it just started with an impulse of calling a few people and saying like, hey, would you be interested in making, or would you be interested in participating in a digital platform, kind of evolved into an artist run space or something like that online that takes place on a number of channels to which you regularly contribute great things. So yeah, I think you're right, though. I wouldn't have made that link because I don't think about these things that often analytically, I guess. But I think you're absolutely right that somehow that was like organizing, in the sense that it's not really like you're coming up with exactly the result that you want and then hiring or asking other people to execute it, as much as you're convening people and then together with those people making some kind of a project. And I think that also has links not only to activism and organizing, but to choreography, where that's a sort of much more I think that's a much more accepted way of working. And you often see like a company, you know, of course the companies are often headed by these charismatic choreographers who are associated with the work. Just like in the art world, collaborative work often goes under the name of the artist whose atelier it is, but still there's a recognition of this sense of the weaving together of a social fabric of a community or a collective as a very important aspect of making something. And I'm focused on that aspect of making things. And I like to try to get the public to somehow be able to dip into that or experience more of that than keep that all behind the scenes, so to speak.
Right. Well, I mean, I do think that connection to choreography is fascinating. It reminds me of one of my favorite books of the last several months, Barbara Ehrenreich's Dancing in the Streets, A History of Collective Joy, and how that book really also connects the act of group, you know, dancing together as a way that people in every culture nearly come together to actually achieve some sort of communion with something bigger than themselves. But I also think that the way that you are connecting, you know, as you said, like this idea of convening, like that in some ways it's just about first starting by bringing people together and bringing them into a space and then seeing what emerges from that room. And it's something that, at least from the both inside and outside, both being a sometimes collaborator of yours, but also having, you know, really just gotten a call from you and then trying to seeing home cooking really emerge over the first several months of the lockdown in Europe, is just also how kind of natural it felt in a weird way. But that's the thing about convening, is that I think there's always a structure. It's just that sometimes, you know, you don't notice that structure, or it feels less frictionless. I mean, I'm curious, like, you know, so much of the work that you've been making as an artist in the recent years, like, has also involved bringing together large groups of people, experts in different fields, to kind of work on something together. And I'm curious, like some of the projects, like the most recent exhibition that you had at the Gropiusbau here in Berlin, which I know is a longer project. I'm curious if you can tell us a little bit about how that process of a project might unfold for you.
Mm-hmm. This is fun, actually. I'm having fun here, Prem. I'm thinking about things that I did in a way I haven't had the chance to do. I guess with absorption, just to explain a little bit for people who, most of the people here probably don't know what that project is about. What you experience as a visitor is you come to a museum or to an art space, and essentially you come into a kind of what looks almost like a land art piece, which is a a set of rooms, usually one large room and a couple of adjoining rooms, all of which are completely filled with soil to the depth of 20 or 30 centimeters, and you walk
actually,
right on top of it.
You know
And then
what? I'm going to ask Julia if she can pull up an image of that. That would be,
Sure.
then we even have a visual. Julia, do you mind?
That makes it easier.
Yeah, exactly. Like maybe we can go to that that last image, but keep going and we'll pull it up while you're talking. Sorry.
Sure. And so as a visitor, you come into that situation, and then there's actually people there, and the people who you meet there are actually cultivating the soil. So they're turning the soil, they're raking the soil, they're adding new material to the soil, and they're watering the soil, and they're also doing a lot of scientific measurements of the pH, the moisture, the salinity, and other parts of the soil to make sure that it's in a healthy window. You can see in the image, that's the Gropius bow with the soil beginning at the elevator lobby. And so what it turns out, what you learn after you go in there and you talk to these people a bit, or if you read if you read, is that it's an artificial soil. It's not just that we bring soil from a farm or from the landscape and then dump it in there. We're making soil out of a lot of waste products that we collect in whatever city we do, and then we give it to the visitor. So the visitor is allowed to take. We give the visitor soil in what I call neo soil in these bags, or they can even come back and take more. And on the last day of the show, all the soil that we've created over the course of an exhibition is given to community gardens, individuals, schools, botanical gardens, anywhere that wants high quality, very fertile soil, in which we've created through a lot of scientific process. So the question that you asked, Prem, is how does something like that come together? And the truth is, it would be impossible for me to do something like that alone in a studio, because I'm not a soil scientist, and I don't want to poison people or give them a toxic material, or like take the wrong elements from various waste from various factories and combine them in the wrong way and make an environmental hazard, or a toxic waste dump. So I was at the very beginning of that project, which I was originally commissioned to do in Australia by John Caldor of Caldor Public Art Projects, which was a big honor because they've been doing interesting, relevant, and really dynamic public art projects for 50 years. The first one was Cristo wrapping the coastline of Australia, 1968, 69, and then 50 years later, I did this thing, Absorption, in Sydney. But anyway, John said to me right away, he was like, we need to contact soil scientists. And I said, yeah, for sure. And so then we started this interesting conversation about a year before first doing the piece there with soil scientists. And then PhD students in soil science came aboard and started like really hanging out with us and talking. And the main soil science, one of the most well-known soil scientists globally, is a guy called Alex McBratney. He happened to teach in Sydney. So I kind of got close to him and started talking a lot with him. And for some reason, he took me a little bit, he decided that I was okay and that he would spend a little bit of time on hanging out with me and talking about how we could do this. And then of course we needed a whole group of people to mix and create this neo soil in the space, people who I call cultivators. We went through a long process of trying to find those people. Each time we do the show, it also entails, let's say, a search for different people who might be not just experts in a particular task that already exists, but I think of it as having this other kind of quality of some sort of openness to a new project, which maybe doesn't sound all that clear as to how it can happen, but are somehow willing to just jump in there. And I think people from art are often have that mentality. People from the film world sometimes have that mentality for sure, especially in production. And then of course you do have people in science. Some people in science have such a mentality too. And bringing different people like that together and then helping, allowing them to kind of bring their ideas and then adjusting with those ideas is somehow the way I know how to make projects. Basically, I make projects by talking with a lot of different people and then kind of figuring out what to do together. But in a project like that, it just started with me thinking a very simple thought, which was basically for the last 3 centuries, our industrial economy has taken the landscape, fed it into a big separator and processed it into different material components and commodified those components. And we never go the other direction. We never take these piles of toxic, separated out components and recombine them into something fertile again. So I just thought maybe that alone, and then giving the result of that to visitors, would be a fun thing to do if we could figure out how to do it on a small scale.
Well, I think that there is something so, what I find so remarkable about that project and a lot of your work really is that despite, some of the weighty implications of this, thinking about waste, human society, and all of the things that are left behind, like all the kind of violence embedded in that, there is a kind of optimism, or at least it leads to a next action. It's like the last thing in that installation, at least as I experienced and a lot of people, is the act of getting a gift and getting a bag of soil that you can get either smaller or larger, and then we seem to have some mosquitoes, but allowing things to grow in it. Like the soil I got is now growing flowers outside of my studio. And so just like as a last question, I wanted to ask you about like how you think about art also as like seeding processes like this. I know that a lot of the work you've also been thinking about recently, I mean, some of the conversations we've had have been about art and its relationship to policy, like these other moments in time, like during the New Deal, when artists had like a different role in society. And I'm just curious if I can, as a kind of closing question, ask you to speculate on those questions of how artists can be involved in kind of changing things in the future.
I think that's a great question to think about. As you said, there's an interest, not just on my part, but on a lot of people's part these days, in thinking about how art can be embedded in society, or how art can be embedded even in the political structure, again, in a way that a lot of people have been thinking about the model provided by the WPA and by the use of artists in the New Deal to give employment to out of work artists, but also to do a lot of interesting work that wouldn't have happened otherwise, and the government becomes a kind of commissioner of that stuff. And so what I think is that program, of course, being Federal One under the WPA, which is a very famous program, which if you people who are watching this right now have not checked out what Federal One was and what they did, I'd recommend to Google that and read about that program. So it's a very innovative thing that happened during the New Deal. Now, at this moment, of course, we're looking in the United States at a possible political regime change, and there's a moment of like trying to figure out how can we take the world, the difficult situation, the crisis situation that we're in a lot of different places, and how can artists be a part of something different. And I think what's interesting to think about for the future in relation to this question is how artists and what artists do themselves have changed over the last 80 years. So I do think that the New Deal and the Federal One program is a great thing to think about and a model, but I also think that artists are doing something very different right now than they were in 1930, and what artists do today, it engages in the society in a far more than simply retinal way than I think they generally did in 1930. And that aspect of artists as people who produce social reality, who create links between things, but who are also able to ask questions that don't get asked inside all the disciplinary silos that exist in academia and in the corporate culture. Like, artists are people who are sort of crazy enough to still try to think holistically about our culture. And that alone, I think, has a value. And so I'm interested if I get into a position where I can exert any influence on how artists can be, part of the political and part of the social life of our culture. I like to think of the model of John Latham, in the artist placement group from the 60s, where John Latham, the British artist, great artist, had that idea to embed an artist in every major corporation. Well, in the 60s, corporations were seen as an interesting kind of new force, potentially for social good at the scale that they existed, things like IIT, et cetera. We're not that, I don't know if the corporation is the structure that everyone is really pining for and thinking about these days, but we definitely are seen to be pining for and thinking about ethical and political structures, ethical and political superstructures. And it's my opinion, if artists can, be able to operate the way they do and be embedded in those kind of things, that could be really helpful, interesting, and it could lead to a lot of holistic thoughts. So that would be my reaction. Anyway, I'm glad you asked that question, because I've been thinking a lot about this issue of how artists can intersect with the political structure.
Yeah, well, thank you. I mean, it's fantastic to hear from you. I feel like we could spend, like with any of the guests on the show, and actually probably anybody in this room, we could probably talk for hours and hours and hours and have a great conversation. I think that to keep things moving along, I want to focus on that last thing you said, and what we were talking about also, the question of, new soil, new generations, and what might come in the future. I mean, you have a young daughter who is one of my favorite people in the world, Alma. She's also become a little bit of an internet star, I think, through home cooking. Since all the times when you would announce new programs and artist works, I think Alma was usually there. I'm wondering. I mean, Emily and I had this great book here that we thought we could read to her, if she's up for it. And I mean, I would say if anybody else here has kids, feel free to pull them over, because we are going to read one of our favorite books if you have a moment.
Let me see if I can grab Alma, and I'm also going to mute myself, Prem, because I know that you're going to do something new. But thank you, and I'm going to see if I can grab Alma so she can hear this.
Great. Well, so, as we've been talking about, just while you're all grabbing your any children who might want to join, Emily has her camera on one of our favorite books. And this is originally a book in English. It's called Hugs in English, but I actually think that it's even better in German because it's Schmusen. Schmusen. So schmoozen. So hey, Alma. Hi. So okay. So let's see. So Alma, we wanted to read you a little book, which is about hugging, but it's also a way to learn a new language. You can learn some German too. Your mom's German, so you're learning a lot of German too. But for all the rest of you, so schmoozen. Okay, let's start. Oh, it's a little happy monkey. Schmoozen. Schmoozen. Oh, a little cuddling elephant. Schmoozen. Schmoozen. Oh, all the other animals are hugging. Oh. Wait a second. I don't want to be spotlit. No. Yes. Oh, schmoozen. Schmoozen. Oh. They're having a really good time. Oh. The giraffes are having a good time. Schmoozen. Oh, even the hippopotamus are having a good time. Schmoozen. Oh, schmoozen. Schmoozen.
I understand that feeling.
Alma, schmoozen.
Poor guy. Bobo!
Oh my God. Mommy.
Oh my god, it's so good.
Oh,
we got
schmoozen.
Schmoozen. We got. Do we just
Schmoozen. You missed this one. This
got
one.
that one?
Schmoozen.
Schmoozen.
Aww. Schmoozen.
Everybody's happy.
Schmoozen! Yay!
You want to go first?
Mommy.
Bobo.
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 Okay. Thank you, everyone. That is some schmoozing. Some things are just better in German. So, okay. Well, let's see. So that totally took me out of the frame of mind of doing a show. So, right. So we have as our next fantastic guest, we have Courtenay Finn joining us from Cleveland. Yay. Can we all have a round of applause for Courtenay Finn? Courtenay, there you are. Let's spotlight you. Hi.
Hi, that was great.
Thanks. Well, I mean, I have to admit, I just learned that book through Emily and her kids, my stepkids, but I love it. It's so good. It's just like,
I feel like the word schmoozen encapsulates what it feels like to squish and hug someone. It's so nice.
I know. It's just like, it's a word. It's like an onomatopoetic word that like sounds the way it is. Like you just want to schmooze in. I know. And I mean, it's this thing about children's books. I mean, actually, like Tina Kukalski, my co-artistic director from Front, whom you obviously know, Tina said this thing to me that was brilliant a year ago. She said, children's books are like self-help for kids. Like the point of them is that they actually teach tools. They teach like ways to kind of be in the world. And like, the ethic of that, everybody is missing, everybody's got these little like families and like, you just got to find your mama. And it's like, there's something to be said for that. I know you've been doing a bunch of teaching. Haven't you started homeschooling a bunch of your kids' friends?
Yeah. So on Fridays, I'm the teacher for 4 7-year-olds in 2nd grade from 8 to 5 p.m. So it's a remote learning school here in Cleveland is for the most part still online. And so friends of mine turned their basement into a micro school. So these girls could play together and learn together. And because of everyone's work schedules, I volunteered to do Fridays. So we do art projects and a lot of reading.
Well, we could send you a copy of Schmoozen because maybe that could be helpful too if you ever need to teach them another language.
Yeah, we can all start learning German together.
I do love sending books to folks. So, I mean, it does feel like so much of the work you're doing. I mean, it makes sense. Have you ever taught young children before, or is that the first time?
No, this is the first time. Yeah.
So I guess COVID is making us all take on new challenges and learn new things. But it seems somehow like, I mean, we've only known each other for what, 2 years or so?
Yeah.
But I feel like I've known of you. Like I knew of you in all of your other, kind of amazing wanderings through the curatorial world, from art in general to the Aspen Art Museum. And then when you landed in Cleveland, and I was like, oh, well, I'm so glad that we can intersect in that way. But learning somehow seems like that would always be part of your work also as a curator. I mean, how do you think about that in terms of like teaching, education, but also like learning in different ways when you're thinking about curating?
Yeah, I think it's really important. And I come to curatorial work from an artistic studio practice. So in a sort of, I don't even know what a traditional curatorial role would be. So just from a sort of meandering kind of way of thinking through practice and making. So for me, it's sort of natural. It's like I'm always learning and adapting. And I sort of see the curatorial role as somebody who helps other people tell stories. So more of a collaborator. So I'm constantly learning new things, depending on who I'm working with and what the context is. So in a funny sense, spending all my time with 7-year-olds is just like a sort of another art project or another. They're just the artists. I'm just
exactly. I mean, you're just playing the role of facilitator in a different scale. Mm-hmm. I mean, I do think that it's so interesting because I think so many curators do come to curating from artistic practice in different ways. And oftentimes I feel like that's a thing that's like left out of the official narratives of what curating is about. Like people think curating is about, creating objective truth or, putting something on a wall label that's like fact. I don't know. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, no. I feel like that's actually where institutions get themselves in trouble. This idea that we are the sort of sole authority on what we show, as opposed to approaching it more from a position of caring and sharing. I like to think about it like when you read a book or see a movie or listen to an album that you're really excited about, and it just did something for you. And now all you can do is make sure that you tell everyone you know that they have to listen to it or read it, and then you want to talk about it. And that's how I feel like institutions, exactly, institutions or spaces in which are working alongside artists should function at. There's something that Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel said, where he said, the goal is not to have, but to be, not to own, but to give, not to control, but to share, that I feel like we could all sort of embrace more holistically.
That's a really, no, I mean, that's definitely a nice quote. And it's like, yeah, like to see something that you also love and then to like make space for it or to try to find a way that that love can reach other people. But it's true. I mean, I think institutions like in our present moment too, I mean, in so much going on, I mean, I think you're right that sometimes when they try to act like they're not a collection of people, but they're actually like some kind of faceless thing is when they run into some of the biggest problems. I mean, I know that, I know the MoCA, your institution has had some challenges in this period. I mean, I don't know. I'm sure that's also been a learning experience.
Yeah, it's been an incredible learning experience, or also unlearning, and thinking a lot about how what the intersection between curatorial practice and institutional practice look like, and when they are in alignment and when they are sort of in opposition. And I learned a lot about what happens when the institution centers itself instead of the constituents it serves or the artists it's working with. It's been making me think a lot about vulnerability as a space of transformation and a space of repair and healing. And what would it look like if we all were okay with not only just being uncomfortable, but admitting that we were wrong or that we failed or that something we tried didn't work, and talking through it with other people in a sort of more holistic way. So I think I don't know, I think our institutions are at a really pivotal point for thinking about how to move forward, which I think is good.
No, and I'm glad you say that, because I do think that it's one of these things where actually it just came up in this Mia Birdsong book and How We Show Up in like the first couple of chapters, like this idea that we're taught to think of like, that making mistakes is something bad. And that, if you make a mistake, it's like you try to keep up your pride and you pretend like you didn't make a mistake, or you try to, not take ownership for it, rather than like, okay, something may have gone wrong. How can we learn from that? And how do we move with that? It's a very different stance.
Yeah. One of the things we say on Fridays when I teach is there's only winning and learning. So there's no such thing as losing. And it's funny, I think spending time around children really makes you think about, how that space of vulnerability or how they work things out, and how sort of like unashamedly honest they are, and how that can also get them into trouble. But then like things also get resolved. They're like talked out and then they move on. There was like a lot of fighting over sharing whose pencil is whose and who gets to go first. But then it sort of gets resolved and then they continue to play. And I think that's like a model that, I don't know, we could be embracing more together.
Yeah, I mean, another book that has been really, meaningful to me during this COVID pandemic and the last 6-7 months is Richard Sennett's Together, about cooperation and the kind of the ways in which one of his arguments is like a developmental psychology argument, that actually children learn how to cooperate before they learn how to kind of be individuals. And so actually that like there's a kind of societal impetus that like makes us unlearn these skills for being with others, which we might actually learn on the playground.
Yeah. I mean, I grew up moving around all the time, like mostly overseas. And so a lot of the play that I would do was with kids where we wouldn't speak the same language. And it just blows my mind. You find a common ground through, gesture and action and, actually being present with one another, that I feel like you start to unlearn as like a tool of self-preservation as you get older. And I feel like we have to find our way back to it.
Right. Well, I mean, it's also in the wake of the kind of controversies and challenges that MoCA has had. It seems like, at least from the outside, it seems like you've really also been thinking through aspects of the programming and the exhibitions and like what it means to be a museum of contemporary art in a moment like this, when even like the act of gathering together is something that's charged in a whole different way. And I mean, I'm curious, like, what are some of the things that you've kind of taken away from that and kind of tried to start to prototype within the program?
Yeah, so one of the things that we've been trying to do is thinking about this idea of stretching or expanding exhibition platforms. So having projects unfold in chapters and not being so stringent to a sort of linear rollout of time. So an exhibition that we had for the fall called F as in Frank is actually going to roll out in a series of different projects over the next 2 years as the projects are finished and culminate in a book, rather than sort of sticking to a more traditional exhibition format. We've been giving things more time and more resources and being open to sort of going against the sort of way we normally do things. And then we've been playing around with a lot of lateral working. So we have work groups for projects that encompass people from all different departments, trying to break down the sort of department silos that happen in institutions where like the curators work with the artists and then the marketing department markets the thing, but the marketing department, which in the case of MoCA is one human named Tom Poole, doesn't actually interact directly with the artists. And so we're thinking, like, what if we built it from the ground up together? So the first initial meeting, like Tom and whoever we're working with meet and work together so that the strategy isn't sort of other people adding to something like a Christmas tree that just gets ornaments, but we actually like decide what kind of tree and what kind of theme and from the ground up together. So it's been, messy. It's hectic. Trying anything new is messy, but it's been working. I wrote a wall text for the museum with 7 other people. Input, we drafted an outline and I worked on it and I got feedback from folks in education and marketing and the finance department and security. So yeah, we're just trying a lot of new things.
Well, I think I mean, I like to, like in my own experience, also working with these different hats as a designer, as a curator, and in different contexts, I always find like the most important thing is not what my role on paper is, but that like in a way that everybody, like all the people who might be useful in a situation are at the table from the earliest possible point. And like, that means that like, maybe as a designer, like my role might be in certain contexts, not, being the artistic director or the curator, but just being at the table means that instead of graphic design being an afterthought or education being an afterthought, as you said, it's like it all, like the best aspects of these different things can come together to make a project together. I mean, it seems like a lot of that is going on also in the project that you've been working on with Paul Ramirez Jonas, Public Trust. And I was really hoping you could tell us something about that project. It just seems like the way it's engaging in this time with people seems really remarkable.
Yeah, so Paul and I are working together under this F as in Frank show, but his initial idea involves a lot of closeness and touching, and it's not so COVID friendly. So it's probably going to appear next year. So as we were talking about what the institution was going through and where we are and how people feel about coming inside the building and reopening, we decided to present this piece, Public Trust, that he did originally in 2016. And it's a large marquee wall that goes outside the museum. And every day he sends us a text message of promises that he's pulled from the headlines. And they get added to the top of the marquee. And then we have this promise table that you can see here. And individuals come and sit down and have a conversation with the person working at the table and think of a promise. And their promise gets added to the large marquee. And we make a drawing of it that they get to take home. And then you have to swear to keep your promise. So this is me, that last slide was me swearing with someone on a pinky swear for her to keep her promise. And it's been great. We're staffing it with museum staff too. So, and I do it on Saturdays. So it's been a really interesting thing where instead of facilitating the project, I'm also part of the project. And we've been talking a lot more about what that means for folks to be embodied and embedded into the work. We facilitate it and take care of it in a different kind of way than, hanging up a painting and then watching it from there. So yeah, I love that.
That's great. I mean, well, in some ways, it's also like the role of the curator being I mean, curating, obviously the word comes from care, but on the other hand, there's also something like almost being a conspirator, which I like, I mean, maybe that's I mean, maybe, well, okay, there's a lot of conspiracies at the moment, so maybe we shouldn't get too much into that route, but it's like the idea that you are, you know, you're there, you're helping to make space for this project, but then you're also actively part of it. Like there's not a separation. Like you know, and I think that that's interesting. Like your role is both helping to make it happen, but then also really being there on the ground and being part of it as it unfolds.
Yeah, and it's been an incredible learning experience. So the other people participating in it are some folks from education, other people, but a lot of folks that signed up to do it. So we basically made it open to anyone in our staff who wanted to do it, and then did a whole training together with Paul over Zoom. But a lot of the people doing it are members of our installation crew. So people who normally are on the behind the scenes back end of building a show, who without which we wouldn't not have projects. And now instead of sort of like putting it up and walking away, they're like actually facilitating it. And so I'm learning so much from spending time with them. And then we've been learning from our education, and because everyone has a sort of different way of performing the piece. And so it's creating these sort of network of relationships between people that generally maybe only work together in specific constructs, and sort of breaking the barrier down between that. I don't know, it's been great. It's also just been so nice to speak to strangers and to talk, to get together in space and talk about the value of language and the meaning of our words, and how that sort of is the glue that keeps our society together.
Right. Well, I mean, and it's true that one of the things that I feel like almost most worried about sometimes in our present moment, but this gives me a little bit of optimism, is, you know, that for those of us who can, for those of us who have the, you know, high-speed internet and computers and the bandwidth and privilege to be able to, or even the ability and privilege to work from home, rather than having to be on the front lines, it means that, like, for example, I feel closer to my family than I did, you know, 8 months ago, a year ago. I talk to my parents all the time. I see my mom is actually even here in the Zoom, though she's a kind of black square. So she might be just a, you know, kind of Zoom zombieing. Whoa, there's some sort of, oh, okay. It sounded like explosions outside, but I think it was just a car, something. I don't know. It sounded weird. So anyways, but what I was saying is that on the other hand, what I think is really a danger I see is that there are fewer and fewer opportunities to meet people who are unlike you. Like, you don't have those kind of weak ties that draw you together. And, like, you know, one of the things that, for example, I used to, when I was younger, we've talked a little bit about this before, but, you know, full disclosure, I like karaoke a lot. I think those of you who have ever been on the show before know that, you know, I'm a big fan of karaoke. But truth be told, when I was younger, I used to always end up doing like karaoke in private rooms with my friends, like somebody have a birthday party or we'd go out. And so it'd be 6 or 8 people whom you already knew. And what really changed was, like, literally 2 years ago, I was in New York and I ended up going to do karaoke in just a big bar where everybody was all in the same place. And I started to have all these new conversations with people. And I realized, like, the interest in karaoke, and I swore to never, that was my promise. I said, I'm never again going to do closed room karaoke again. I will only ever do karaoke in a place where we're all part of it and we're all cheering each other on. And, like, that's the nice thing about karaoke. It's not about skill. It's not about, like, performance with a capital P. It's actually about, like, enthusiasm and, like, how much love you bring to the thing. I don't know. I wanted to, you know, one of the things that is a ritual of this show is that we tend to do a little karaoke with our guests. And how do you feel as a curator about karaoke?
I feel like, okay, so the part about karaoke that I love is exactly what you just described, which is the camaraderie and the support and the warmth that flows between people, no matter how good or bad you are at the song, and also what it reveals about you, the choice of song that you pick, and that sort of spirit. For somebody who has to do a lot of public speaking, I hate being the center of attention. I actually wanted to be a curator because I thought, oh, it's like a behind other people, like other people will shine and I'll just be to the side. And then that didn't really work out so well for me. So I will do it with others in the spirit of love, but I'm usually nervous about it, if I'm going to be honest.
Well, okay. Well, and I hear you. It's always, that's why, that is the great thing about doing it in a room, is that you have other people to cheer you on and even sing with you, especially
Mhm.
with something where we all know the words. So, well, I wanted to, so I thought maybe, for any of y'all who want to join in, you can unmute yourself and maybe we can just spend, the next 4 minutes singing together to something that seemed particularly appropriate. When I asked you, Courtney, what kinds of things you might do karaoke to if you were forced to do karaoke in a public context on a Zoom show, you mentioned Fleetwood Mac. And
It's-
so,
Yeah. My love of Fleetwood Mac knows no bounds.
So for this is the opportunity for any of you all to actually open up your audio and let's try to cue this up and we can join in and see how the lack of synchronicity and latency on an internet connection might work. Okay? Is there audio?
Hear me calling out your name. All I know is
Can you hear me?
calling out your
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Courtenay, for being brave enough to do that, for being vulnerable in online, on screen. Thanks, everyone else, for singing with. It's nice to see some folks there. And let's just thank you, Courtenay. Thank you again for the conversation. Again, I seem to be like losing where we are. Everything we do just like throws me out of it. But yes, thank you, Emily. Emily has the structure. That is a very good one of her qualities. So next on stage, and last but definitely not least, we have Christian Faubel calling in from Cologne, Germany. So Christian, wo bist du?
Ich bin auf I'm at my workplace actually, because here I have a best internet connection. And
Perfect.
I'm a bit nervous because I'm doing this the first time online, and usually I do these presentations using an overhead projector, and now I got what is called a digital presenter, and this is this thing here. And I'm excited whether it's going to work out to do kind of my presentation. But you asked me before how you want to set it up, and I was like, yeah, well, I'm going to do like a clear 10 to 15-minute lecture. And during the course of the show, I became aware that we should, I mean, if there are interruptions, I welcome them. And if there are questions on what I will be telling, I welcome this. So please interrupt when stuff is not clear. It's going to be a little bit abstract what I talk about, but I think there are some connecting points. And that's where you eventually might want to tune in. Yeah, and I'm very happy to be here and to meet all of you. I think in the room I know Pram, and I saw that Bala is around, and she's kind of like one of the I first met Bala and then Pram, and I mean that before I said, I mean this little story, it's so crazy like how I met Bala, because I met Bala through an internship at a robotic manufacturer in France. And I got to that internship because I was hitchhiking from France to Germany, and with a very friendly guy who gave me the contact to the owning family of that big company. And that's how I ended up in France through hitchhiking. And I once gave a job interview, like my first job in research in Bochum. They asked me to do a presentation, and I did a presentation. I called that From Hitchhiking to Robotics. And this time where I met Bala kind of like was a very important deviation in my life. It really put me on tracks to robotics and then to a lot of other themes. And yeah, I promised Prem there's going to be a bit of robots, but I start with the theme that I've been working on for quite some time now. That is the question of the analog and the digital. And now I'm going to switch my camera. I hope that's going to work, to my presenter. Yeah, cool. That's good. I hope you can still hear me.
All good.
Great. And I hope you see what I'm seeing as well. So one thing, I mean, this is, for me, it's really an experiment to do something like this online. What I like about the overhead projector is that I can, it's this interface. And maybe now I'm going to be converted to someone really digital, if it works well, let's see. So one of my obsessions is this question about the analog. Basically, it's really about the analog. But of course, kind of like in a dialectical way, there is then also the digital. And what I felt over the last 20 years working with electronics like this, which is basically analog, that there was a specific quality to the analog that cannot be matched by the digital. And that was just an intuition. And it was clearly not about the fact that the digital is binary. whereas the analog is sort of like, how do you say that? I need to put up my notes. This word doesn't come up.
What's the word in German?
Wait. Graded. So the analog is graduiert.
I wouldn't have gotten that in German anyway, so yeah.
Or the digital being discrete and the analog being continuous, you know? I mean, this is something I felt like it's a discussion, of course, also like in music or in film, whether there is kind of like a different quality in the resolution, for example, but that didn't seem to me like the thing I was interested in, because it looked too much at kind of like fixed states. And I became aware, and thinking about it in the last 6 or 7 years, that it's very much about process. And here, process, it's already kind of like the way I'm doing this. I think it's a different process when you watch me, because there's something different happening when I write process, whereas when I pull up process as a ready-made word. And if you look at process and you ask yourself about these qualities of the analog, then you can come to a fundamental difference, and that difference shows up in one phenomenon or one necessity, that is synchronization. And that's already maybe one of the touch points with what we heard before or what we've done before. And on the process level, we talk about, when we look at the analog and we want to understand these processes, we rather talk about force fields. Whereas on the side of the digital, we are talking about algorithms in the strict sense. And if you take that as kind of like this process question, the process model of the digital is then the Turing machine. Most probably many of you have heard of what the Turing machine is, or maybe just know the term and don't know what it exactly is. I don't want to go into the very details. It's a very it's a theoretical concept that is very strong, that is behind all our computers and all the algorithms that are running, the algorithms that are connecting us now as well. Although there's one difference. I mean, in the strict sense, the very moment that that a computer is kind of like facing input, like from a camera or a microphone, it's not algorithmic anymore. The algorithm is something that's really happening kind of like in a closed system, which is a computer. I brought this is from this one of my slides, which I usually I do this presentation with the overhead projector, and it's a great joke to put on an image of an overhead projector on an overhead projector, because it has this recursiveness. And now it's the first time it makes sense to pull up that image of an overhead projector, because we don't see it otherwise. It's not here in the room. So this is a slide from my presentation. It's an image I found of someone who has built the Turing machine. And the very basic thing of the Turing machine is that you have, it's the idea that you have an endless paper strip. And what is important is that on this paper strip, you have symbols written on. These could be A or B, or this could be zeros or ones. And then on this paper strip, so usually it's endless. This is already something that shows you that it's a purely theoretical concept, because we don't have endless paper strips. On this image here, you see that it's going to end at some time. This is just a paper roll. And on this paper strip, you have a reading head, some mechanism that can read in this symbol, and you have a writing head, so it can do both. It can read or write. That's here. You see the writing part, and I think here is kind of like, here's a camera. That's the reading part. in this model. And when you think now of this, that's the fundamental of any digital device. It has to read and write symbols. I hope you follow me till this point. And I guess you're wondering where I'm taking you. Now I realize I have to start my clock, because otherwise it's going to be too long. I want it to be fast. Now, there's like one little mental exercise that you have to make. If you think of this mechanism is basically moving along this paper strip, and sometimes it's reading a symbol, sometimes it's writing a symbol. If you think of a machine that would have more than one reading or writing head, so a second head that's moving along, which is basically what you have when you have like a multi-core, multi-processor device. So basically kind of like your standard phone is facing this problem. You have to take care of that. Like if you do this mechanically, like here, what you have to take care of that they don't crash into each other, right? If they want to go to the same symbol at the same time, you have a problem. They mechanically will bump into each other. So I put up this little quote and I'll read it to you. This time I'm not going to write it. It's from Vogelmann and Scherfig. They made a publication it's called about the weighting when computing. In German, it's über das Warten beim Rechnen. And the German title is very nice, I think. And it's exactly that problem. So when the computer is computing with multiple processors, it has to substantially wait. And this waiting has to be synchronized. And so what they say is that from this general perspective, the problem of synchronization is inherent to algorithmic computation. Without being explicitly wanted, the necessity for synchronization is a consequence of the nature of computation and thus deeply inscribed in the notion of the algorithm. So what is important, you don't have to understand like how any computation is done that way, but that very argument is important, that in the digital, synchronization is a necessity. So that's really what is important, necessity. Someone has to take care about it, and someone has to come up with rules. You need strict rules for your computer to follow. And these rules are external. They are not within the system, they are sort of external rules. It's like, you can think of traffic lights. By the way, in computer science, like the most established way to deal with multiprocessor systems is called a semaphore, which is a Greek word for a traffic light. So if you are with me until here, now comes the next step, that's looking back at the analog again. And on the analog, synchronization, instead of being a necessity, is an emergent effect. There was one book title, I forgot already, which was something with emergence. I wrote it down though.
Emergent strategy. Yeah.
Emergent strategy. So it's an emergent effect, something that's not built into stuff. And the first time it's described is in a letter from Christian Huygens. Christian Huygens was a Dutch researcher, and he is known for being the inventor of the pendulum clock. And the pendulum clock, well, most of you know it. You know the clock that's run by this big pendulum. And he invented this. He was I don't know from when to when he exactly lived. He's like a 17th century fellow. And he invented these, and he did build them. He did experiments with them. He did build them for ships, for navigation. So they were really massive to run on a ship, to run stably on a ship. And the story goes that he had built those clocks within the house he was living in, it was his laboratory. And he was, apparently he was sick for 2 or 3 weeks. And during that illness, he made a strange discovery that his clocks were running in a counterclockwise way. So they were doing like this, but stably. And apparently he wrote that in a letter to his father that can be read in this publication called Huygens Clock. And I find this interesting per se that, I mean, it's quite telling that sometimes you have to be in bed for 2 weeks to make kind of like a groundbreaking discovery. Interestingly, he didn't, I think from my perspective, at the time was not right to see the implications of that. Because for me, it's really, in a way, if you can think of the clock as kind of like the basis for a mechanistic worldview. Whereas when you think of like that phenomenon that 2 clocks start to go in synchrony without anybody telling them, that is something that kind of like gives an openness towards this mechanistic view, that even to mechanisms that you think you fully understand do something that you don't understand. I'm going to try to restage this Huygens experiment. When I was packing my stuff this morning, I didn't find, I need like a support platform. And I used this once already, so I take my cell phone. I didn't find the usual thing I'm doing because this is it's quite nice. And I have like 2 pendulum clocks, and I'm very nervous whether this is going to work. You know, now the backup is we could pull up some YouTube video, but you can look them up later as well if you like. So these pendulums are set to the same frequency, and I think you should be hearing them, but you're not seeing them. Sorry. And it's kind of like, this is like more like a Steve Reich thing. Sometimes they will be in sync, sometimes they are not. Now I will try, but if I put them on this platform, let's see what happens. I think it's a demo effect. It doesn't quite work. I mean, now they're in counter phase. But actually, the phone is not moving at all. There's something is wrong here. Doesn't work. Well, it's maybe because of the digital phone beneath. I don't know.
The digital has undone it.
The digital has undone it. No, it's strange. Maybe I think it's because I put it the other way around. Let's try one more try. No, it's not working here. Maybe it's a table. Let's try it on glass. That's better. Now what you see is that the platform starts to move around. And now they're really, that's a sign that these 2 metronomes, they are connected. And it's about that's what I said, it's about a force field. And now you see they are in sync. And it's running off the image, sort of. So what is the fascinating thing about this is really that they synchronize this because they go into I would call it they start to communicate. There is an exchange of forces between them, and one can see them as a model for what happens when we go into when we do movements like that. So, for example, when you do finger tapping, we can all do that now. Maybe you can tap. There are like two patterns that are very easy to do. I do this like this. So one is in phase with both hands like this, and the other one is counter phase. All other patterns are very difficult. And interestingly, when you look at these metronomes, there are like two patterns they go into when you allow them to talk to each other, and that is in phase or counter phase, basically. I'm tinkering a lot with electronics, and there you get this effect too. And I see somewhat in this, like doing this with technology. For me, this holds a sort of utopian speculative narrative of alternative technology that behaves in very different ways. And I'm going to try to make that work as well. That is to have these robots. So these are, it's the stuff I'm doing. This is really, it's based on a robotic thing that was developed. So walking robots that were developed by Mark W. Tilden in the 90s. Very kind of like critter-like robots. And I use the very same electronics. So basically you have here some, you see that there is some oscillator, you see something's going on and off, it's like a metronome. And to that metronome, to this electronics, I can connect this motor. So now you might be able to see this motor doing stuff here. And now I have to switch the microphone. I hope it's gonna work fine. Let's see whether you can hear that.
You should be hearing me right now, and
we do hear you.
Yeah, and you also hear. You now hear this motor hitting on a rubber string?
Yes.
Okay, good, that's cool. And now, where's the second motor? It's around here. Wait. So it's basically a similar setup as these two metronomes, and you hear that they are kind of like they're out of sync. And now I can, similar to this to the phone that was acting as a platform to connect the two metronomes, I can use the cable connecting where I can control the connectivity of the cable. And you see that they are now in counter phase, or you can also hear that. And it is this there, and it's what I find fascinating is this idea of a technological system that sort of snaps into such a rhythmic structure without having that rhythmical structure explicitly encoded anywhere. So there's no symbolic representation. It's kind of like it's a gradual thing to turn on this, to modify this connection. And I can, let's see if I get them in phase as well. Yeah. So it's only a matter of connecting these two, whether they go in phase or in counter phase. And they, again, it's exactly these two regimes that appear. Everything in between is hard to realize. Okay, now I think that is kind of like the lecture part. Now I did a lecture anyways without interruptions. I switch the video so that you can see me again. Basically, yeah, that's kind of like what I wanted to.
Oh, we don't hear you anymore.
Sorry, I also have to switch the microphone. Wait, I switched back to the other microphone.
That's a wacky microphone. That's a very
But it's actually better than the
one, but I don't, the other one I don't have to hold. Okay. You're still hearing me, right?
Yeah, but we don't hear any more of the music, the sound.
Yeah, okay.
But that's
Yeah. Well, makes that I can be hands-on. Oh, no, maybe it's better we keep the sound on.
I just hold this big microphone. Yeah.
okay. Well, I mean, this question of how the connection of the thing, there's not actually any symbolic connector between the two. So it's not digital, but it's actually the physical surface that is connecting them and making them go in phase or out of phase. It has some relationship. I mean, one of the things you said to me in a conversation we had a couple of weeks ago was this idea, and maybe this is something you can say a couple of words about before we start to wrap up, is the idea of robotics and thinking about the relationship of robotics to mirror neurons, to the neurons within us that allow us to mimic or react to what other people do, something we learn from childhood or that's inbuilt in us.
Yes. So basically, what is wait, I have to make. Give me a second. So this phenomenon of that's happening or that you've been observing right now is an emergent effect, and you can and I think if you think about any moment of togetherness or of interaction between humans, that's something that's also fundamentally happening. Kind of like and you can enforce this by certain exercises. For example, one exercise would be to clap your hands together. It can happen in a group of people that when you clap together, that everybody finds in a rhythm without being the master clapper or being the main person driving the others. But you can find a rhythm, and I think this is something that relates to when you think about the mirror neurons. That's the system that is actually becomes active when you are observing someone else doing an action. So you are always kind of like doing the action of someone else when you observe it, kind of like mentally. That I think, and that's most probably part of, if you would want to understand empathy, where that comes from, is that you're kind of like doing stuff with others just by watching what they do, and also there is something. So if you watch someone else clapping, you sort of start to mentally synchronize to that clapping as well, and to imagine now, to think of technologies, that's what I'm interested in that could kind of like operate on such levels. I find that very interesting. And on the other hand, I think one has to be very clear that using, like, with algorithmic approaches and pure digital technology, this can never be achieved.
So maybe that's a way for us. I mean, I think that as a kind of way to think about what the relationship of different people in a room can do that maybe different, digital algorithms in a room might not be able to do. I wonder if we might try almost as a kind of closing ritual. I mean, I think that there's so much more to talk about, and we posted in the link. Let me also we'll post in the link one of your longer lectures, the Salon Digital lecture from a little bit ago that we'll put right now into the chat. But maybe what we could do is we could actually change all of us, our view in the top right to the gallery view, if you like. We can move from the speaker view into the gallery view. And I wonder, I mean, one of the problems with this kind of technology of Zoom, but also in general, this kind of group communication is the latency, is the problem that doesn't allow us to kind of be in sync with each other. But I wonder if any of you want to turn on your audio and we can see if we might be able to simply make a rhythm together as a way to be together before we close out today's present.
Aber es ist sehr schwierig.
Hast du der Mic an?
Ja, aber schwer. Weil man sieht die anderen, aber der Sound ist irgendwie...
Okay, well, thank you everyone. Thank you, Christian, for the demonstration and for learning something more about analog and digital. Thank you so much to Courtenay for being with us on talking about care and curating and testing out the curatorial karaoke, and to Asad for also thinking about art and activism and organizing and how we can think about the future. And most of all, thank you everyone here. I mean, so many people have stayed for the whole thing to actually be part of this experience. And, we are going to be continuing this. Part of the idea of Present is that it's not a one-off. It's really something regular that we'll do on the last Sunday of every month. And so you can look out for this again at the end of November. It'll be the same time, same place, and we'll continue to think through these issues together, but also try to find ways to be together. And I mean, I'll just say as we go, hopefully there's also something that we've learned from the experience of trying to, synchronize ourselves with others and see how that might work, but also what it means to be a body in space that we can take into our next day and week and month before we meet up the next time again. So thank you everyone again. Thank you again to our fantastic guests. Thank you to Front for supporting and presenting this whole season of Present. And most of all, as I said, thank you everyone here. So let's have a round of applause for yourselves, for everyone, this wonderful group of people. Next time, we will be able to snap. We'll try snapping in real time together. So with that, I'm going to say we are going to close it out. I'm going to put into the chat actually a final song. Rather than dancing together as we've often done, I'm going to put into the chat a final song suggested by Christopher Kulandran Thomas and Annika Kuhlman by Colin Self, Stay with the Trouble for Donna. And so this is something that I hope we can all take into our week and continue to use as we dance out our energy. So thanks everyone. Thanks again for coming, and see you all soon. Okay. Is that coming into the chat? Are you somebody? Julia, where are you? There you go. Okay, great. Last dance song for everyone. Download the chat if you need it, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Bye, everyone.